Hi, B31ers. So I'm pretty excited about this week. Of course, I'm pretty excited about every week. Um, what we're talking about this week, though, is going to be really, really useful. I'm going to give you an opportunity to try it because if you don't try it, how are you going to know what works? So let me jump into a screen share here so we can take a tour of what we have. So from down there and click on the menu, but I'll click on modules, just because that's an easier way to say things. So there's module 1, and now module 2 is open, digital citizenship, which is a little bit of a misnomer for this module because it covers really a whole lot more about creating community, setting expectations, the interactive class part. So that page in particular will be super useful to you as you are working on this research project. Of course, we have to have a bit about academic honesty in there. And then there's going to be an assignment at the end where you propose what interaction you want to put into your project. So last week, you were proposing your topic, and I gave feedback on just about everybody. I'm going to go back through and make sure I didn't miss anybody. But I want that to be a continuing conversation. I want you to really focus on what you can change in your practice, because that's the only useful thing anyhow. You can't change what the students do until you change what you do. And you can't cultivate community until you become a part of the community and learn how to facilitate that. Engagement, all of this emerges from this idea of changing your practice. So when you're looking at your research question, what you really want to ask is, what can I do differently in my practice that will impact my students? So let's start at the beginning, digital citizenship. This page is just a brief overview, and it will give you a little bit of an idea of what we're going to do. But there's a really good video right out here on the top, right in the front, laying the foundations for success online. It's not a very long video, but it's Michelle, we say her name wrong, Pachansky Brock, okay? And she has lots of really good information there. And she's going to talk about some specific strategies that you might find actually very useful for your research project. That might be one of the sources that you want to use for your project. If you click over to the next page, this is that cultivating community, try it piece. Remember last week we had cultivating community, and I had you do something for that. Do you remember what it is? You'll have to go back and look if you don't. But almost everybody did it. And so this week, we're going to jump in based on some requests that I received. We're going to jump into this idea of informal learning communities. You know, have you ever heard from your students when they say, well, am I going to get a grade for this? Like, what do I get out of this? Don't be that student. So what I've done is if you go to the people tab, and I'll go through this page a little more, but if you go to the people tab, what you're going to see is a tab for groups. And I set these up based on the topic areas that seem to emerge from your guys' interests, from what you put down as your research questions. So this isn't like the end all be all. It's not perfect. You can see a few people have already signed up for different things. I have it set up so that you could go in and sign up for more than one item at a time. Now, for some reason, the test student is not allowed to like sign up for anything, whatever. Anyhow, but you can go in and participate in more than one group at a time. And if you feel like there needs to be another, like a different topic, or maybe under student engagement, maybe some major subtopics emerge, just let me know. I can create groups. I can create stuff in Discord. Like I can do all kinds of stuff. So you just let me know if something would be useful. Let's go back to this page. Let's go back one more page. On this page, what I'd like to have you learn a little bit about is this idea of a community of practice. Like, community of practice is a really interesting structure that emerged out of businesses, out of the business community. Because, you know, businesses, somebody comes to work and they do a whole lot of training with that person, and that person's there for a certain, you know, however long they're there, and then they leave. And when they leave, what tends to happen is they take their knowledge with them. And so all of the investment that the business put into this person, there was no way to capture the knowledge. Another problem that they faced was that there was no way to bring new people in easily because there was already groups set up, there's already structures in place. And so it was really hard for a new person to sort of break into this domain. And so this idea of a community of practice emerged. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to participate in a community of practice if you want. Okay, nobody's going to force you to do this, but that's what those groups are all about. I'm not going to moderate those. I'm not going to give you any assignments for those. Whatever happens there is going to be the responsibility of the people who jump in. Somebody will probably take the lead. Somebody will probably set up some discussion posts. Um, we'll see what happens. But those are great places to build knowledge. And so let me come down here a little bit. What makes a community of practice successful? Now, what's interesting about this is although this did emerge out of the business world, it has been applied to education over and over and over. Okay. And so a successful community of practice clarifies what the community's for or who it's for. So we've done that. We've kind of set up these topic groups. It gets those people together regularly. So we have a space for that. It might start off by sharing stories because what you're trying to do is build personal connections. It creates opportunities for learning, building trust, adding value, and supporting each other. And then it sees what works and then turns up the good. So if it works, you amplify it. And if it doesn't work, you let it go. And part of that you find out by sharing stories. And so one of the things that these groups might be able to do is you could say, well, I want to try this thing. I tried this thing with my students and here's what happened. Those are the kind of stories that would be really interesting. Anyhow, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I'm a huge fan of communities of practice because in graduate school, so there's this book here, Cultivating Communities of Practice. And in graduate school, we were supposed to read this, I think, in the first quarter. But there's so much to do in graduate school. And I was working full time as distance education coordinator at Porterville College. And I had a lot of kids. Like, who has time to read all that stuff, right? So, somewhere in the third quarter, I picked up the book. I finally read it. And then I was just like, oh my gosh, this book frames my entire action research. It really did. I feel like I need to read it again because it was that impactful. And so I even have an autographed copy. I'm so geeked out about that because I took the book to a conference later in that year that was run by the people who wrote the book. And I was totally geeked out about that. Anyhow, super good book. Um, there's a link to it if you want to go check it out on Amazon or wherever. It's been out for a while, but the practices are still super relevant. And communities of practice are important from two standpoints. So here in this class, you're going to look at it almost as a professional development opportunity because it is a really good way to connect people. And it's a really good way to provide some shared context for what you're doing. Okay, so I've made the space here. It's up to you guys to inhabit the space and generate the knowledge and collaborate and all those good things. But it might also be something that you can use in your classes with your students as you're building community, as you're going through different projects, especially for the hands-on stuff. So you might find some really useful ideas emerge out of this. I got a little sidetracked today because I have so much fun reading about communities of practice. And I was trying to find a really short video that just gave you an overview. And so this is a Powtoon and there's no like audio on it, but it's got all the words. Anyhow, it gives a pretty good overview. It's pretty decent. It's only a couple of minutes long. And in a nutshell, in a nutshell, this is pretty commonly the definition that you get for communities of practice. There has to be a shared domain of interest, okay, which we have. There's all those interest groups. There has to be a community, so members pursue this interest because they're trying to do something. And then there has to be a practice, like you have to put into practice what you're learning in the community. That's the community of practice part. So communities of practice are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do, and they learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. Kind of sounds like what we're doing in this whole series of classes, doesn't it? Down below here, I could have put 1,000 resources, but I didn't. The university, I'll start at the bottom. This video here is over an hour long, but it's Etienne Wenger, the author, one of the authors of the book. I think it's about an hour long, and he's going into a lot of interesting detail about social learning theory. And again, there's a lot of the stuff when you look this up has a business context, but if you think about it in the professional work, like in our workplace as professionals and in our classroom, there's lots of value to be found there. University of Wisconsin lists a long list of resources. There's another video because he was a keynote speaker. And then these 2 pages are from Etienne Wenger and Beverly Trainor's website about communities of practice. And then this other one is this top one, I put it on the top because it's got a ton of resources. I'm just going to open it up really quick. Like getting started, encouraging participation, just this section alone, you might find useful for building community in your own classes. And then growing knowledge, how you do that, and sharing results, it kind of steps through these whole processes. So that's a super useful page. I put that on. All right, enough of that stuff. Let's jump through. I'm going to go through these next sections rather quickly because I want to hit the very end result so you know what's expected. This page about building communities, again, builds on not just our students, but what the community that surrounds them also, because that has an impact. It looks at the 5 stages of group development, and this has been around for quite a while, this forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, although that last one was added a little bit later, because at some point the group ends, and so you have to figure out how to do that gracefully. And any of these that you open up, you know, it's got a definition. It says, how does this relate to your online learning community? The 4 phases of an online course, so it takes this and specifically looks at online classes and strategies that you can use that will help build community in all these different segments of your class. So this is a very useful page. This next page is all about setting expectations. And it's okay to set expectations for participation, all right? I've talked to a few people about this, but I will just briefly tell you a little story because my winter intercession class started off really, really well. It's 6 weeks. We're doing 16 weeks in 6. So we're in week 4, got a couple more weeks left. And I gave them permission, instead of turning on the video, to put a picture up. I said, that's okay. And so all of them put a picture up. And then I started noticing, because we meet in Zoom twice a week for a couple of hours, I started noticing that people were not turning their video on that had been. I thought that was curious. There's like, out of about 20, there was about 4 that were turning on their video on a regular basis. And then I started getting feedback. So we started off strong, and then things sort of started sliding. So then last week or week before, I started getting feedback from some of the more active students, the ones who I knew really participated. And they would say, you know, in the breakout rooms, I was ready to do this activity, and and they all knew, here's what you need to be prepared to participate. And they would say, you know, but people aren't turning on the cameras, they're not talking, they're not ready. Okay. So I had probably about a third of the class telling me this. So I put out a message and I just said, here's my expectation. Okay. You need to participate in some manner or don't show up. Like, I'm not just checking your name off because you're here. Like, just showing up doesn't do anything. I expect that you have active participation. And if you don't want to turn your camera on, send me a message and tell me why. All right. Now it's a little trickier if you're in K-12 because there's some other considerations. But, you know, in community college, we're talking to adults here for the most part. And so I set this expectation and I said, message me. And what I did is I sent them a private message in Discord. I have a channel for each student, a private notes channel, and it works out really well. So I sent them this message and I got a really good response back. This last week was really good. A couple of people said, oh, you know, I didn't think about it. A few other people said, well, once I noticed that other people were turning their cameras on, I started feeling, or turning their cameras off, I started feeling weird that I was the only one with a camera on. So that was an interesting thing. I hadn't even thought about that. And so anyhow, it's okay to set the expectation that they participate. Because what's the point if they're going to just sit there and be a bump on a log? What's the point of them being there? They should go do something else. So there's some information here about creating a learning pact, this idea of I do this and you do that. So there's an example here, again, from Michelle Picancy Brock, what you can expect from me and what I expect from you. And then I went ahead and added my example. I actually put this in my syllabus. As your instructor, this is what I do. And as a student, this is what you do. And it goes right up front. And in my syllabus quiz, I actually list these things out. As a student, you're responsible for, and I list these out. And then I say, tell me what 2 or 3 items on this list you think you're going to have a hard time with. Check the box for the ones you think you'll have a hard time with. And then tell me why. Because that gives me an opportunity to start a dialogue with them about good student strategies, about useful skills that they could develop, just about all kinds of really good things. I'm sorry, I should have turned Discord off. I'm noticing my messages are popping up from my students. They have a big project tomorrow, so they're panicking a little bit. So this page is going to be the most useful page for you. I mean, I think they're like all useful pages, but this page is going to be super useful, okay? And so in the project, you have to have points of interaction, 3 to 5 points of interaction, right? And a lot of you ask me like, so what does that mean? This is the page for you, okay? So there's 3 kinds of interaction. We talked about this in B30 a lot. We've talked about it here a few times. Instructor to student, student to student, and student to content. And if you can connect students in all 3 of those areas, you've got a really good chance of them being successful. And so in these drop downs, in each of them, there's a whole ton of resources, okay, that are examples. There's not a lot of detail though, because I don't know what you all want to use. And we'd have like 45 pages of stuff here if we did that. And so, excuse me, I got to turn Discord off. She's being very chatty. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can see the notifications, but they keep popping up. So I'll have to talk to her when we get done. Anyhow, so definitely check some of these things out. If they look interesting, just click the link and go find out what they are and say, would this work for my discussion? And there's lots of really good information here for you, okay? It's not the end all be all list. If you have something else you think should be here, definitely let me know and I can add it in. So kind of goes without saying, we're in digital citizenship, academic honesty. There's a really good talk that was given by Dr. Alex Rocky. Most of you guys know Alex. And so I just left it in here. And this has an example of some of these points of interaction. So it's a little bit long. It's about 14 minutes long. I'm pretty sure you can double speed it if you want. But go through it and mostly pay attention. First of all, the content's really good. But pay attention to the interaction. She's got some quiz stuff. There's a couple of other things in there just to give yourself some ideas. And here's another one about adding quizzes. So if you want to add quizzes to your Canvas Studio videos, that shows how to do that. And then last but not least is the discussion for the week, okay? So your job so last week you identified your question, and with a lot of you, we were kind of going back and forth a little bit, honing your question. Remember to focus, and it's okay to still refocus your question, but remember to focus it on the I. Like, what can I do to change my practice that will have an impact for my students? I would like to learn how to blah, whatever, so that my students have stronger engagement or they get better feedback or whatever your topic is, okay? Focus on the I. Anyhow, in this discussion, let me come down here a little bit. What you're going to do is identify 1 or 2 tools that you're thinking about using for your presentation, for your 5 to 10 minute presentation. You can use 1 or more. It really depends on what you decide to use. That's why I would take some time and just like click through a bunch of those options, because you might not even know some of those exist or what they do. And so anyhow, so in this discussion by Thursday, again, same schedule as last week, by Thursday, and it's the same format. What tool do you want to use to present your mini lecture? How will you use it to support the 3 to 5 points of instructors, I'll have the content, all the interaction. So just kind of describe, like, I'm going to put a question here and I'm going to do this interaction there, and describe what you want it to do. And then what feedback, again, would you like from your peers on this tool? Like, do they have some experience with it? Do they have some ideas for how to use it? And for your plan for interaction? And then by Sunday, so after Thursday, if you can wait till Friday, because what tends to happen is that the people who post early get all the comments, which is what happens. But if you can, wait till Friday to start your feedback. And then always try to pick 1 or 2 people that haven't gotten any responses yet. You can, in Discord or in Canvas, you can collapse it and look for just just see the main posts. So definitely try to find some people. I say, respond to at least 2, but if you have the time, go through, for 2 reasons. One, it's nice to get lots of feedback, so people like that. But 2, you might get some ideas by reading additional posts. So don't just do like the first 2 that pop up and say, oh, I'm done, that's good. Okay, I know we're all busy, but do what you can. So that's about it for what we're doing today. This is really a cultivating community week. This is the week that gives you some hardcore tools that you can actually use and put into practice. And that's the goal for everything we're doing here. Your goal isn't to make a perfect online class, it's to make your online class a little bit better. I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday because we were talking about a class, like the CIS 101 class. I've been teaching that class for, I don't know, like 15 years, probably longer. I've been teaching that class for a really long time. I've taught that class at 4 different colleges, but it's pretty much the same class. And so I have a lot of, like, I don't know, tricks in my bag for how to teach certain things. But I'm always looking to make it just a little bit better. Is there a way I can explain this or streamline this or add this, or is there a new discussion? Like, I'm just always trying to make it a little bit better. And so in your online classes, I mean, there's a huge push just to get the content up. That's like the big push, right? First time through, get the content up. And even if it's a class you've taught a long time, if it's your first time teaching it online, it's the same process. Huge process to get the content up. But once that's up, you can start thinking. And even as you go along, you can start thinking, is there a way I can tweak this just a little bit more, make it a little more interactive, a little more engaging? Is there just a little thing I can do to cultivate some community? I'm going to tip the hat a little bit. Next week, I'm going to do a try it, and I'm going to actually give you some ideas to try. And I want to see if people will go try it. We'll see what happens. See if people will go try a couple of these real simple, little, easy win ideas, and then bring feedback to us and let us know. Did it work? Did it not work? Do you need some more ideas? Anyhow, that'll be part of what I'm kind of boiling through my head, or rolling around in my head, to help you guys with next week. I want to give you practical things that you can actually go try, but you gotta try it for it to work, or to see if it'll work. Anyhow, have a really good week. I'm looking forward to, I just love reading through all your topic ideas and stuff. So I'm going to keep commenting on that. And don't hesitate to ask me if we want to jump into Zoom together. And we'll go from there.